I turned the fire hose on you this morning. We're gonna have so much information that we're gonna give you that I'm gonna have to get started here pretty soon. We're gonna have a bunch of handouts too that Linda is preparing for us. The topic this morning is, like, where do I live? Senior housing kind of issues. How do I pay for it? And making sure that what I want to have happen to me actually happens to me at the end with regard to our finances and our healthcare. So we're going to talk about a lot of subjects. Any one of those subjects could be 7 or 8 hours alone. So the best we can do this morning is give you an overview of this, and we'll give you some handouts and links to find additional information. Linda, I haven't passed out anything yet. I don't want to just yet. Thank you. Thank you. Let me open in prayer. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for bringing us together here this morning, this gorgeous, gorgeous spring morning. We revel in your creation, in its freshness and newness, and we just realize, Lord, that you indeed are our Creator, and have created all of these things here this morning. We ask you to send your Holy Spirit to be with us in a special ways, that we might be absorbing some of this information, and that we learn a few new things, Lord, about finishing well, the last lap or two of our lives. So we just ask you to be with us and bless everybody here today. We pray this in the name of your Son, Christ Jesus. We're going to do things a little differently. We're going to start with Bob Swenson this morning, and he's going to do his character study to set the scene for what we have today.
This morning we're going to look at the Apostle Paul. Last week we looked at King Solomon, and here you have a person that started out really well, but didn't end well. Today with the Apostle Paul, we're looking at an individual that started out well and ended extremely well. Paul lived quite a long life for that time period. He lived approximately 66 years. He's originally from Tarsus. He was trained under Gamaliel, and I think I equate his training to a college professor today, someone who's got multiple degrees. Has a multiple doctorates. Very, very intelligent man, and this will serve him really well as his life goes on. Now, Paul is very passionate. And he's very passionate as a Pharisee and passionate for Judaism. And he sees this new movement with Jesus as a big threat. And he is determined to stop that. The turning point in Paul's life, and everything else I'll have to say about him, happens on the road to Damascus. He has an encounter with the living Jesus. And that encounter changed everything in his life, and you'll know in all the things he does from that point on, it reflects back on that encounter. So it is the point in his life that changed him. Paul is a tremendous writer, and we have so much to be thankful for from him, because I'm going to just list off the books that he wrote. He wrote Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. All of them from Paul alone. So all of this training he had early in life really paid off in his ability to write and communicate clearly. The other thing that I want to highlight about Paul, one is that Paul used the phrase Paul, an apostle of Christ Jesus by the will of God. That was a very common phrase that he used over and over in his writings. But he did one more thing. He set an example for us of how to live. And I'm just going to go through a little list here of the things he did, because it is just amazing, and it is so valuable to us today. He set the tone for God's timing. for waiting on God. Sometimes what we want, it's just not gonna happen when we want it. God's will for a person, God's grace, and Martin Luther really came back to that. Living out God's will in your life, relationships. Really talks a lot about relationships. He talks about life's detours and how God is at work. That one I've experienced with a diagnosis of cancer about 1.5 years ago, so I have first-hand knowledge of that one. Trusting God for the future. Paul just was able to just go forward in total trust of God's will. And a willingness to go anywhere. It didn't matter where God asked him to go, he would go there. And at the end of his life, he writes what is such an amazing thing. He writes, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the course, I have kept the faith. That's from 2 Timothy 4:7. And part of that reflects one other thing. We think of positive attitudes as being a modern day thing. Paul had a very positive attitude that long ago, and you see it through his entire life.
Thank you, Bob. Fabulous. Well, my topic for today is housing. Where do we live as we age? I guess we'd all like to stay in our own homes as long as we can. Really, I think we will, and a lot of times though we have to create accommodations in order to do that. Bill, you've done a great deal of accommodating in your place to allow you to stay there. But let's face it, there are times as perhaps as we age when we do need some help in order to stay in our own homes. There are available many services to allow us to do that, especially in the state of Minnesota. We've got a lot of resources. There is adult daycare service. Did anybody ever hear about that sort of thing? These are programs that can provide health and nutritional and these are social services for people with physical or cognitive needs. Some of these programs provide specialized care, for example, for memory loss, getting people out of the house. And some also provide health monitoring and medication administration. So there are these kinds of things available. Now, I'm going to mention a lot of things this morning that are available, and the question is, where are you going to find these things? In the back of the room, I'm going to have 3 sets of handouts for you this morning. One of those is a reference site for you. Lots and lots of places on the internet that have links to sites that give you more information. It's impossible to go through all of it here this morning. Does anybody here not have access to a computer? Okay, we all do, but they're available in public libraries and other places too if you need them, or if you have any problems with some of these links, let me know. I've drawn a lot of this from an organization, perhaps the best single website that you can go to is at the top of the page. It's from an organization called Leading Age of Minnesota. And Leading Age is an organization that I happen to be part of. I'm a trustee of this organization. And it's a nonprofit that provides governance and oversight and educational materials to senior care organizations and individuals. On that website, there's something called Family Resources. It's the most powerful tool you can possibly find as a starting point when you've got any questions regarding living. Where do I live? How does all this stuff work? How does Medicare work? How does Medicaid work? What's elderly waiver all about? All of those kinds of things. It's a great jumping off point. Like I say, it's on a sheet there in the back. But again, if we want to stay in our own homes, there's also has anybody had to provide care for someone who was staying in their own home? You have, Julie? And Janet, to a certain extent, I know we have for our parents, and some people, you're actually living there. There may be a spouse taking care of another, but there are resources for those caregivers too, that need a break. They need help, they need advice, they need to know where to go for more information. So there's even an organization that specializes in caregiver support services, education, training, assistance, finding appropriate services, counseling, support groups, all of those kinds of things. We're also seeing, I saw down in Florida, bringing up more ministries within churches that were aimed at caregivers, to give caregivers a break. Somebody would come in and take over for you for a week or something so that the caregiver could get away. There's something called case management services. And these are organizations that are provided through the Department of Human Services in the state of Minnesota, some municipalities. Again, many websites for that, but it's a place for you to get information about a loved one or even about yourself to prepare for a lot of these housing-related issues. Just so complex. There are groups and organizations that provide chore services. You need to stay in your own home, but there's questions, this spring about, raking your leaves and cleaning your gutters and things like that. There are organizations that help you find those kinds of services also. There's organizations that will help you with the financial and paperwork assistance. So the point is you don't have to go through this all entirely on your own. You aren't the first person that has gone through any of these things. There's people there to help you. The trick is finding the right ones. So anyway, there's just many things like that. There's even cleaning services and all kinds of stuff. Safety and monitoring technology, you know about that. Transportation, Gil uses Metro Mobility, right? What a more fabulous tool that is available to you to be able to help get around. So, that's all dealing with, staying in your own home. But there are, times when you get to a point where you realize you can't stay in your own home. Or maybe you realize you shouldn't stay in your own home. Or in some cases you've got a loved one, a parent, or somebody that you feel shouldn't be staying in their own home. The trick is convincing them to make a move, and that's very difficult. Anybody going through those kind of problems? Oh my. Holy mackerel, it's a very common problem, huh? Mom and Dad are kind of stubborn, not wanting to stay in their own place. But, there are just tons and tons of places that are available for people to live outside their own home. And, you don't have to go very far. It seems like every time you turn around, you see all these magazines around. Places and Senior Housing and Resource Guide, Senior Housing Directory, Minnesota Good Age. Just overwhelming the amount of information that's out there in these kinds of things. But they basically, these senior housing options break down into a couple of different categories. There's just straight independent living, finding an apartment which you could live in. And there are many of those. Anybody live in one of those right now, or have a parent perhaps that's living in Rick does and straight independent living. They're also available independent living with some services available. And some of these senior housing things have services like shopping, taking people shopping or running errands for them and doing other things like that. And we see a lot of those, and most of them are market rate. Whatever they cost is what they cost. You can't get much financial assistance or help in paying for those things. So it's great for people who have the financial resources. There are then also subsidized apartment buildings. I'll touch on it a little bit, but the state of Minnesota has something called elderly waiver, which helps subsidize the rent of people who don't have the financial resources to pay for it on their own. And they basically sit down with you and figure out what you can afford, and if you find a place that will accept you, you'll pay a very, very reduced monthly rate for those. Linda's mom, mother-in-law Lydia, was in one over here at Newton Manor, which is right there by Presbyterian Homes. That's an elderly waiver home, very nice apartments, one-bedroom apartments. They're just delightful. And what did she pay? Something in the neighborhood of $350 a month, I think, for her apartment, and it included the utilities. So you're approaching something that gets to be a little bit affordable. I know there's other people here within this church that have also taken advantage of elderly waiver, but the trick is finding it and getting it. And I've given you the links and the handouts in the back, various websites and places to go for more information on how you find that sort of thing. Kathy?
Well, and I found that a lot of the places that accept the elderly waiver, you have to have like 1.5 years private pay before they'll accept you an elderly waiver, or a year private pay, or 2 years. Each facility has a different amount of time. And then they only have so many units that are considered elderly waivers, so there's a waiting list.
Yes.
And
that's why
it's a trick.
It really is. Navigating this whole thing is time consuming, and figuring how it works is not easy. One of the suggestions I would give you, if you think you yourself or your mom and dad or a sibling might need something like this, is get on the waiting list now. Because sometimes those waiting lists are 1.5 years, 2 years long, or even longer. So pick out one or two that you think you'd kind of like to be in or might be interested in. Get on the waiting list, because if they call you and say they have an opening and you're not ready, you can always say no. You can always say no. Most people wait until it's too late. That's the bottom line of these things. We then have something called assisted living. You got independent living, you got independent living with services, and then you got assisted living. Everybody here had first-hand experience with assisted living? Yeah? Okay. Roxy, what?
My mom, we
Your
put
mom?
her in a year ago to us.
Okay.
assisted living.
And what does she have? What kind of
She,
assistance?
she's fallen twice and she's been there and broke hip and her arm, but she gets medication for meals. They take her to and from for meals and activities, but it is quite expensive.
It
Now,
is.
fortunately, she had the money, so because you have to pay, self-pay for about 1 year to 1.5 years. Fortunately, she has enough money that was able to do
Okay.
that.
Get through that
But,
first
right,
period of time.
right.
Well, Jerry?
My mother's under the same situation. She's in a home in Lonsdale. They give her medications. She's got an apartment by herself. She has medications. She gets 3 meals fed a day. She has to pay. It's not cheap, but she sold her house, so she got some money and stuff like that. But
Okay.
I don't know if this goes into here, but I'll bring up a question now that I'm speaking, and then you can address it later if you want to.
Thank you.
When we were dealing with Mom, we were talking about things, and we got involved in something, there's sometimes insurance for long-term care that's good for so long. Do you know anything about it?
Yes, there is that sort of thing. Sometimes it's called nursing home insurance or other things. There's a variety of insurances that are available to pay for some or all of the costs of
Turns, that's only good for a year and a half, so.
Well, somebody, it all depends on the policy you buy. You can buy some,
Up to 3 years.
you've heard of some 3 years, I've heard of 5 years and 10 years.
lifetime.
Pardon?
No, you can-
Lifetime, sure.
4 years on each of us, or cumulative, if one needs it more, you can donate the entire 8 years.
Oh, I
to the
see,
spouse,
okay,
the one we
alright.
got. Yep.
There's all kinds of insurance schemes out there for these sorts of things, and you have to make your own decision as to whether or not you want to do that. If you think you do, buy it as young as you can. Like a lot of insurances, the longer you wait, the more expensive it's gonna be. I'm not endorsing it, but you have to look at your own assets, your own financial needs, and do it. Well,
There's an annuity that I was able to put some of the, John's IRA into. If I don't use it, it's still an IRA, I have to pay the taxes on it.
yes,
If I don't use it, it's available,
yep,
which is not type, usual in insurance.
sure.
You're paying into that every year, but I'm not, so.
I've heard of some that are more sophisticated, they work like annuities as well. And if you need it for long-term care, or assisted living or anything like that, it pays it, and at the end of your life, anything that's left over gets returned to the estate. So that's a pretty good program too. Yeah,
You can also get long-term care insurance with inflation riders, where as inflation goes up, it goes up with it.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
some are on a set amount, like we've got one 3% a year, regardless what inflation is, or you can index it to inflation, and of course, they rate your premiums accordingly.
Yeah. Bill?
Pat, I'm looking around the room here, and this probably wouldn't pertain to us, but for a lot of the younger people in church. Many years ago, I started to think the odds of claims for disability insurance are 17 times as high as a lot of other insurance types of policies, homeowners, fire insurance, also. And I was fortunate to be able to get a disability policy that really helped me through some very difficult years. And for any of the younger kids, I would certainly recommend that.
Those of you who are working, your employer may have disability insurance for you. If you're not, or if you're self-employed, you can buy it. You can buy it. Yeah. Tom?
Where you were in the assisted care living?
Yes.
One of the things that, I think some of you know, Pat and I are both on the Elam Care Board. A number of nursing facilities and independent living facilities and so forth, including Elam Care, offer a plan where if you go in and just move into independent living in their facility, and then you start needing some extra services, they're gonna physically move you into an assisted living wing. You stay where you are, and they'll bring those services to you,
Right.
which is a huge advantage.
Yep. Continuous care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very, and there's some that are campuses that can move from independent living to buying some services to assisted living and buying whatever services. Some of them are à la carte. So if you want to do your own cooking and maybe just buy one meal a day, you can do that sort of thing, or no meals, or move up to it, and medication, you have a whole menu of services. But some of those same facilities or organizations then could move you directly into one of their skilled nursing facilities if it comes to that where you just are to a point where you can't live.
And part of that too is, if you've got Alzheimer's or dementia or whatever, very often if you and your spouse want to stay in that same independent living room, you can, as long as he or she is looking out for you and caring for you and you want to stay together, that's fine, on the condition that you're not a wanderer or a threat to somebody else. I mean, if you're the kind that's gonna go walking out in the snowbank, they're not gonna let that happen. But, you know, otherwise, you can just stay in your home. So in a sense, the independent living apartment or condo, whatever it is you're getting into, is your home. That is truly, even though you've moved from a house that you were in before into there, that is your home, and the services come to you.
Anybody got anybody in assisted living? Nobody's in assisted living or?
Currently?
Parents or siblings or something? Or, okay, sorry, they're in the system, okay. All right.
She started out at, in this facility as independent living,
Okay,
but then once she fell,
then she needed some services.
right, and she also had a couple strokes, so,
Okay, sure.
yeah.
Well, that's a great example.
But it's a one-bedroom apartment,
Yeah.
so, very nice.
Bill, you were gonna say something here?
You know, God has given us all some wonderful gifts of creativity and talents and resourcefulness. Bonnie was at the Masonic Home where Ruth Johnson's at right now, when she had a hip replacement, the last one. And I was out in the parking lot, it was a pretty cold, brisk day. And I dropped my car keys on the ground and I thought, oh, what do I do? And fortunately, there were a couple of ladies getting out some stuff out of the truck close by, and I asked one of the ladies if she could come over to help me, and I said, that saves my skin, because I gotta get out to the VA hospital this morning. She says, oh, you go out to the VA too? I said, yes. Do you go out to the VA? She says, yes, I do. Well, I found out that she not only went out to the VA, but she was Dr. Stephanie Boyles in charge of the whole spinal cord injury center.
All right.
But that taught me a lesson. I thought, I am gonna have to do something I can't afford. And I went down to REI over here and I got some cliff repellent rope and I tied a knot in it. And I took these doggone things around and Bonnie is squawking at me right now because my cell phone is pretty much a Rube Goldberg type of thing. But I have a lot of quite a few emergency medical training friends who are ambulance drivers, and they say they are appalled at how many people take very serious falls. They're within 4 or 5 feet from a telephone.
Sure.
They can't get to the phone. I thought, well, for the likes of it, I can't use my hands very well. I just put some Gorilla Glue and took a paper clip and put the thing around. At least the same place get. So I mean, for all of us, we can use our creativity. And I'm noticing as I'm getting older, I'm going to be 97 now next week. No. But a lot of people just give up. They quit too fast. They just say, well, I'm going to do this or do that. And I think before we can do that, maybe we can have a little bit of fight left in us to try to make some innovations, which will help us. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Bill. And on the other hand, some of us have dealt with parents that had too much fight in them.
That's a good point, yes.
And let's face it, that is a struggle, isn't it? Is convincing mom or dad to leave the home and facing up to the fact that they do need to be someplace where they can get some help. So if we can be helpful here this morning at all, just to showing you that these things exist, and there's plenty of resources out there, places to find information about these things, then we'll have done a good job. But, so, you know, assisted living, and there's even more specific things in memory care and dementia care also. That work a little bit like assisted living, but there's a higher level of services involved. I guess that's maybe the thing that many of us fear most, isn't it, is dementia. My dad always said that, I could handle any kind of physical disability, but I just want to keep my mind. But there are places available, and there's help for you. You're going to get overwhelmed with a lot of terminology once you start dealing with this, right, Kathy? And in terms of this whole bureaucracy and understanding these things. So I've given you some websites that will help you with those things as well, including some links to organizations like Confident Choices, which kind of grade senior living facilities. And there's a couple of other links to websites that the government and state have grading systems for assisted living and for memory care and for skilled nursing facilities as well. Those are always good places to turn for information about where do I put mom or where do I put dad. But one of the best is word of mouth, and the experiences that others like us in the room may have had, good or bad. these rating systems are fallible. And you've seen some organizations that we know are very, very good, have mediocre scores, and I've seen some with high scores that I wouldn't put a lot of money in. So we have to take it with a grain of salt, with a starting point and a place to start to ask questions. The question then is, how do I pay for it? You know, we talked about long-term care insurance. There's also, you know, your own money, saving your dough, and being able to pay for some of these things. You know, one of the things that we don't always realize when we're staying in our own home, how much it really does cost us to stay in that home. When you sit down with mom or dad, or even for yourself, and put together all your property taxes, your insurance costs, the cost of all your utilities, lawn, garden maintenance, snow removal, all those kinds of things, and add it up, this would be a surprisingly large number. But because we've done it for 30 or 40 years, we kind of lose track of that perspective. And I suggest you sit down with, if you've got a loved one or even yourself, and calculate what it really does cost you to live. And you say, well, I could never afford to live in assisted care or in a senior housing place. You might come closer than you think by avoiding some of these other costs. Does anybody, well, some of you are in, know about assisted living. I've got a statistic here that indicates, I want you to guess how much nationally would assisted living, one-bedroom assisted living apartment costs annually.
4,500.
No,
Annually,
Oh,
45,000.
okay, very close. Actually, the national average is 40,830. That's the national average. Might be a little higher here in Minnesota, I don't know.
That's what assisted living.
If that's assisted living.
That includes all the nursing care and everything that people.
no,
Yep.
that.
No, that's
really?
assisted living.
Yeah.
Kathy, is your mom in assisted living?
She's in the skilled nursing now, but Randy's mom's in assisted, and I do her finances also, and that's about average what she's paying. But again, when I write the check, she's like, oh, that's so much, and I'm like, but it includes all your utilities,
Exactly,
your property
exactly.
taxes, your garbage, I mean, everything's
Everything.
a meal, you know, all
Your
of that's
TV
included.
services, your internet, your phone.
So instead of writing 10 checks, you're writing one.
See, now my mom's paying a little more for, you know, she's got the medical package and medicine and all that. And the rent alone is like 3,500, but then with all the other, you know, the escort service to and from meals,
Sure.
given the medicine, usually each month it ranges around 5,300 a month.
Okay, so it's over $60,000 a year.
Right.
63,000 a
Right.
year. Wow.
Yeah.
Dale?
I read in the paper last week that the average annual cost for a regular nursing home, 91,000 a year.
Let's gonna get to that. That's the next level up, what we call a skilled nursing facility, or a nursing home, as it's commonly called. Was that a national number that you saw, Dale, or
It
was that?
sounded like it.
Yeah. Anybody got any experience, first-hand experience with that?
Oh, yeah, lots of it. My stepmom's been in the nursing home for 7 years over at the Masonic home, and each year her care goes up, and of course, each year the prices go up, so.
Share with us what the price was.
She went in for many strokes, her bill right now is $8,000 a month.
Just under 100,000. 86,000 a year. Well, the national average is 88,000. That's what it was in 2014. They're all over the place.
Well, it depends on the level of care you need, right?
Correct. This is a skilled nursing facility, and we're dealing with averages, and it's right. And, you know, Gunnar, your mom may, or stepmom may need, you know, higher level
She is
services.
she needs care for everything. She's wheelchair bound. She can barely feed herself now. She's getting towards the end time.
Okay. Linda's dad was in Redeemer, but he passed away 10 years ago. But at the end there, his was about $7,000 a month, about $84,000 a year. That was 10 years ago. Yeah, it's expensive. That's why looking at long-term care insurance, if you don't have deep pockets, and a lot of financial resources, might be a good thing for you to look at. But do it now. Do it now.
And she actually had insurance to pay the first 3 years.
First 3 years.
And then after that, she
You know,
I was gonna mention that, I went through this with my mother back about 7 years ago. She was in, she had the highest level of care because she had dementia. And it was, at that point in time, even 7 years ago, it was like $100 and some thousand for the year. I watched my father lose everything that he worked for, all his savings, everything was going, and now he was gonna have to give up his home and put my mother as a ward of the state so that he could take care of her. And I think one of the key reasons we got long-term care insurance was watching what happened to my father, losing everything he worked for. I didn't want that to happen to our finances down the road, where everything we work for goes to the state or to something other than our children.
Right.
And, you know, we want to have some kind of a legacy or inheritance for our kids going forward, but if you don't have a way to cover long-term care needs, it's all gone.
Jeff, there is a way to protect that, because we went through it with my mom and stepdad, because my stepdad is in his home. He's not he doesn't need the care.
Correct.
And he did not want to go into a senior facility, so he's in his home, and we had to fill out paperwork through the county, so that what it does is it protects, so they use all of my mom's money now, being it was, you know, it's my stepdad and my mom. She uses all of her money that was in like annuities, CDs, that type of thing, and her long-term care. And then he has to he filled out paperwork of what his assets are, and because he's in the home, part of his assets has to go to my mom, but he gets to keep a certain amount of the assets so that he can maintain the home he's in.
But does he
So
have
it
to give up,
protects that.
does he have to give up the home
No.
at some point to the state?
No, if he sells it, then they can come in and take more of the money for her care, but as long as he is in that home, he gets to keep a certain amount of, you know, it's a percentage type thing of, you know, how they calculate it out, but he will be able to keep his home.
What happens if he passes on and mom is still alive? Does that asset go to?
The amount, I think the amount that they had determined of his money that goes, like we'll use the example of 100,000, that will still have to go for her care, but anything else,
And some of it may
Yeah.
depend on his will or trust.
Right.
That has to say too.
right,
Pat,
yeah.
and I think what you're talking about is a spousal impoverishment law.
Yeah.
So if you have any of those questions, just, maybe the websites that you have give that, but anyway, it's spousal impoverishment, so that
What's
there's
it called, social?
spousal
The spousal,
impoverishment, it's Minnesota.
yeah,
So that there's a
Right.
low threshold and a high threshold, but the deal is that a community spouse or a healthy spouse should not be impoverished, and I think the most
Right.
you can sort of retain, in addition to your home, is about 130,000, and the rest does have to get spent down.
Right.
But there is some provision to keep a healthy spouse from becoming destitute because of an ill spouse. So that's the term to look for.
But my question would be, in that situation, when both are gone, both spouses are gone, does the state then grab everything and nothing left for the children?
I think that.
I don't know if we can answer that, but that's into an area, interesting, something we call elder law. And I would suggest that if you've got those kinds of issues and you've got some significant assets that you want to, you know, protect or anything else, that you get yourself a lawyer. Linda and I went through this a number of years ago, and we set up a living trust to really protect a lot of our assets, both from probate and the state taxes, as well as protecting assets in case there's medical disasters or long-term care disasters. It's pretty effective. Ray, you had a question.
Yeah, my question is about
along the same lines, but, this quite a few years ago, my mother was in a nursing home, and she ran out of money. And so she went to the state, and she went to the state, she got a lot better care than when she was paying for it herself.
You probably got Medicaid.
Medicaid.
And that does provide a significant level of reimbursements, and the skilled nursing facilities or nursing homes in the state of Minnesota all accept it. Most of them do anyway. There's a few that don't, but reimbursements at a very, very nice level. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, when you talk about setting up a trust or whatever, these are the kind of decisions you need to make early.
Yes.
Because the state, they do a look back to see what have you done with your money. You know somebody's gonna end up in a nursing home in the next 6 months, and then you try to hide all your money, they're gonna come back and look at that. So the sooner you do something to protect it, the better.
And you wanna do it 7 years before.
Is that what Minnesota law is now?
Yeah,
7 years?
before.
Okay.
60-month look back is what I was told.
5 years, yeah. Somewhere in there, but a long time. So start now.
There's another thing now about, long-term care insurance. Now, we didn't have it for Gil, so that's why we've been struggling a lot with that. But the minute he needed it, I knew I needed to get it. And it was cheaper, and I was healthier. So the longer you wait to get that, the less your chances are that you're gonna even get it. You might not qualify. But now there is something that my sister and her husband learned about, that you can buy some kind of a policy that will either protect you or your spouse, whichever one needs to go into the nursing home. So it can be either one of you.
Yes.
And that makes a lot of sense. Because it usually isn't that you both go.
There's more and more products coming in the market like that. I told you about this life insurance policy I heard about. You put in, say, 100,000 or 200,000, whatever you want, and funds are drawn out of that. And there's guaranteed interest every year on that to pay for your long-term care or nursing home, and anything that's left at the end of that gets returned to your estate. So it can be pretty good. Dale, you were going to say something here.
I bought insurance for a nursing home, if we needed it. And that was like 30 years ago, so the rate wasn't too bad. So the only thing is, I put the amount that it cost then was about $1,500 a month.
Oh my!
I did, the gal that sold it to me afterwards recommended I index it for the cost of living or change it. And so we didn't, and that's what we got now. It was unlimited as far as I know for time. In other words, we're in there 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, it covers, but
You only get
it's only
$1,500 a month.
$1,500
You know, that's one of the things you gotta do an analysis of, is, what this insurance is gonna cost you for the number of years that you may have to pay premiums before you need it, and figure out what that is. And sometimes you might be better off just starting to save that money, because the fact is that there are very few of us that are ever gonna really need a skilled nursing facility. And if we do, it's gonna be for a remarkably short period of time. The cases like Gunner's stepmom, 7 years, Linda's dad, 6 years, those are really unusually long situations.
My stepmom's the longest living person in the nursing home, not by
Okay.
age, by years.
By years in there. It's usually, less than a year. So,
Many nursing home stays are for 2 months or 3 months, they're for rehab. You're going in, you fall and broke a hip, you go in, you get rehab, and you go back out.
the Ruth is in right now.
Yeah,
She's
much,
inside.
the trend has been to shorter and shorter and shorter stays, so these long ones are the exception.
Yes.
And most of us will never be in that situation.
And the frustration part for me, the frustrating part of that for me is when we were looking at long-term care insurance, is that when you're reading the fine print, they usually say, will begin in 90 days after diagnosis
Correct.
or needing it. Well, that's 3 months, and they're usually 3 months, so it's not gonna cover anything for you.
Medicare will cover many times its first
Right,
3
but the
months.
long-term care
Right.
is not kicking in when you need it.
Bill was there first, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Obviously, I'm not an attorney, but I have had to deal with several cases over the years where kids' parents, not our kids, they're noticing that we're starting to get a little bit older. And what they'll say, hey, I tell you what we'll do, we'll make a trust situation where my mother and dad will give the money to buy down to the kids. And somebody over here mentioned the term preference. 7 years, that's the legal term, is preference. And their thinking is that then their elderly parents can declare an informal pauperous and get away with all this other stuff. But it doesn't really work that way so well, because so often when parents transfer money down to children, they get into all sorts of entanglements.
Yep. Well, look, any of you, if you or your parents have significant assets that you need to protect, then I suggest you spend a couple $1,000 with a good elder care attorney, get some really, really good advice. If you need the names, I'll be glad to give you the name of the person we worked with who I thought was outstanding. I have to move on to a couple of other things here. You can see this is an extremely complex subject. But there's something called, home health care as well. Bonnie, you're involved in that, right?
Yes.
Bonnie is a home health care nurse. And you go into the homes, generally of elderly people, not always, but, and provide some of the same kind of services they might get in a skilled nursing facility, right?
Right.
Right within the home. The information I have says that the national average cost of that is running about $59,000 a year. And that's for 44 hours a week of service. So it's a less expensive option than a skilled nursing facility, and allows mom or dad or yourself to stay in your own home as well. I want to throw that out as an option, something you might want to consider. Well, look, excuse me, my computer. I want to shift subjects a little bit, and in the time we have left, I want to deal with this topic of making sure that your wishes are carried out. This is an extremely important thing for you. There's two aspects of this. One, there's the legal aspect, the so-called power of attorney. Is anybody a power of attorney for anyone else in this room? Because they're all powers of attorney for people. Well, you know what that is, and you know how important it is. I've got in the back of the room here the current Minnesota power of attorney form, the legal power of attorney form. Take one with you.
I was telling Doug that's one thing off my checklist for today. I was gonna try to find one on the internet. Thank you,
Got
Pat.
it back there. I would really, really urge you to execute one of those. Yeah, Linda, you want to pass it out? It's the, you recognize which one it is. We had them from, my dad, my mom, and her dad, and it was really, really helpful to be able to conduct financial transactions, to be able to act in their behalf in buying or selling real estate, many, 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 many things. It's really important to do. Val.
You put it in a safe, make sure somebody knows how to get into the safe.
What do you do with it once you got it, right? That's important, Kathy.
And we just closed on my mom's house on Friday, and I was the power of attorney for that,
Yes.
and they request the original copy of the power of attorney when I have to submit it.
Yeah.
So I recommend having a couple of original
There you
copies,
go.
because you have to hand it over to the county.
Photocopy this thing and get it signed several times. But Val brings up an excellent point. What do you do with it? Obviously, give it to the person who is going to be your power of attorney, see that they've got it, and see that they are willing to accept the duties that go along with it. Put one in with your own documents. I suggest everybody have a little fireproof kind of a safe where they've got a lot of important documents. Make sure it's there. You might even want to make sure that your physician has it, so your medical clinic. So,
It's not a bad idea to carry it with you.
carry it with you. Oh, my. Really?
Well, when I went
I got
once a year to get, records from Walgreens on,
yes.
what I spent on Jill's medication, they wouldn't give it to me until I could produce
Bingo.
that I was empowered to get.
Exactly, these HIPAA laws, as we call them, the privacy laws now are just so onerous, so they were protecting us when we don't need protecting. But
Even
good.
simple things like canceling the house insurance,
Yeah.
they needed a power of attorney,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
everyone was requesting
Yes.
it, so.
We had so many copies of Linda's dad's, for instance, we were going to banks in New York City, we find, cleaning out his apartment, there's a passbook saving thing, or here's a checkbook, or here's indications of a safety deposit box, and we had to bring it to every bank, and they'll deal with you when you got that information and it's well done. Right.
Well, certainly if you're gonna spend the winter in Florida, I better take it with you to Florida.
Yes.